Okay, we're learning the Maamar actually from Haazinu, which is this Shabbos, which is also connected to the 10 days of Tshuva and Yom Kippur. Hold on a second. Let's bring up this text sheet. Right, so the final Maamar of we're learning the final Maamar of Haazinu, Kinesher Yor Yekrinoi. It happens to be actually the Chumash of today. When I say today, I mean Monday, here in Eretz Yisrael, which of course this is the song of Haazinu. So the pasuk says, it's the middle of conversation. It says Kinesher Yor Yekrinoi. So we'll just go through the translation, the Chumash here. Kinesher Yor Yekrinoi. As an eagle awakens its nest, al goizolav yirachev, hovering over its young, yifresh knafav yikachehu, spreading its wings when it picks them up. You say eyu alav rasai, and carrying them on its pinions, meaning on the backs of its wings. What does it say before that? So the Maamar says, the verse before that says, talking about the Jewish people in the desert, it says, Yimse'eyu be'eretz midbar. That God found them in the desert. And this is going on before, the verse says, that the Jewish people are a portion of Hashem. Meaning to say, Yisrael, the souls of the Jewish people, are an actual portion of Hashem. And where did God find the portion of Hashem, the Chelik Hashem, found them in the desert. So he explains, where does it mean what level are we talking about? We're talking about the name of Havaya, of Hashem creator, Yudke Vavke. Meaning, the level of Hashem, he gives life and vitality to all creation. Is, was, and will be, means out above time. And this chelik havaya, portion of Yudke Vavke, which is, so to say, beyond creation, beyond time, although it's the source of creation, is Yord l'slabish beguf, goes into a body. That deteriorates. I mean, a person lives up to a certain time, and the body then deteriorates and dissolves in the earth. So the part of Hashem that's limitless and timeless goes into something that's limited. Now, so when it goes into the body, it means to say that the chelik havaya going into the body is not just that it's a question of going into something that's material based or something that has a drive in material things. It's also totally counter to its whole existence. Existence of a chelik havaya is hoya v'yia, is, was, and will be, and it goes into something that is hoya v'nifsa, that was and will and deteriorate. And because of that, so the body has a totally different character to the soul. So so when the soul, instead of dominating the body dominates the soul and goes after what the body wants, and the body itself is something that is not going to exist. It's temporary. That's a definition of being found in the desert. It means that the soul is going after things that's beneath it. And not just beneath it in what's appropriate or not, but beneath its existence. And that means that God is that the Jewish person is a portion of Havaya. Where does God find it? Because it comes down to this world and follows and goes after the wants and the desires of the body. It finds it Yimse'eu be'eretz midbar, in the desert. It means not in a positive place. A totally destituted desert that's totally opposite of the name of Havaya Yudke Vavke. And therefore, so that's why the pasuk continues. That says that that the Jewish person's soul comes from a chelik, is a portion of Hashem, and because it comes down to this world and it follows after the wants and the desires of the body, it's found in the desert. So what does Hashem do? Therefore, Hashem comes to the soul like a eagle comes to the nest to rescue the soul. Hashem has to come to the soul with what attribute? If he comes with the attribute of din, then the question would be why judgment? Why are you lost in the desert? What happened to you? Why didn't you dominate the body? So he doesn't come with the midah of din, the attribute of judgment. He comes with the attribute of the nesher, of the eagle, which is the attribute of rachmanis, of compassion, having compassion on the soul, and what it's gone through that it found itself now in the desert. The idea is like this: in Yechezkel's vision of the chariot, says he sees the pnei ari al yamin, he sees the lion to the right, upnei sharmi asmoil, and the ox to the left. Upnei nesher la'arbatan, he sees the eagle, the son of the eagle. Ubir inyan. Yechezkel roar hamarkeva b'zman hagolos. When was the vision of Yechezkel, which represented the situation of the time that he saw the vision? He saw the vision in Golos, in exile. He saw it in Bavel, in Babylonia. The Golul of Bavel. He saw when the Jewish people were in exile and in Bavel. And it says, Shechina imam, that when the Jewish people go to exile, the Shechina, the presence of Hashem, goes with them. Yechezkel says, I'm in the Goyla, I'm in the exile, I'm in the Diaspora. And the Vani is not just going on Yechezkel, it's going on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on the Shechina, that the Shechina is b'toich HaGoyla. The Fikach Roi Slapshis B'chinas P'nei Ar P'nei Shor, and that's why he saw the vision. The way he saw it, of the levels of godliness enclosed in the levels of the animals of the shore, meaning had he been in a higher reality, a vision like Yeshaya, he would see godliness at a much higher level, not the way it encloses itself in the ox, lion, and the nesher and the eagle. In the times of the temple, godliness was on a much higher level of revelation. Like when Hashem revealed himself to the Jewish people, to all the Jewish people, when at the giving of the Torah, that it says, Panim v'panim diber Hashem imachem, God spoke to us face to face. Pirish panim v'panim b'li shum emtsois v'slapshus klal. God didn't conceal himself, like someone who's speaking to someone else face to face, not masked by the images of the merkava of the animals on the chariot. Yes,
I'm confused about the face and the face-to-face references, because on the one hand it says that, and that we can see this, humans face-to-face with God, and on the other hand it says that we cannot see God's face. So I'm confused.
Excellent question. Excellent question. What you're saying is that Moshe Rabbeinu asks Hashem in Parshas Kisisa, show me your face. He says, Lo yirani adam v'cha, you can't see me and live. So there's obviously different levels of panim, meaning to say there's different levels, just like there's different levels of concealment, just like the concealment in the chariot is a concealment, but it's godly. There's deeper levels of concealment until it's not godly, even if we don't see godliness. So to panim is also levels of panim. We have Mimamakim Krasich Hashem, like we say in chapter 130, throughout the 10 days of Tshuva, Mimamakim Krasich Hashem, Oimek B'teich Oimek. So just like there's a depth of Omek, of depth, so too there's deeper level of Panim. You could see someone by their face, but it's still masked behind what's the face. Then you have the pnim, what the person really means. So in the case of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when it says Panim B'Panim Dibrei Machim, God spoke to us face to face by Mount Sinai. So it was not in the concealments of Goyla, of what we have in the times of the Diaspora, but still what Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to see, that he wanted to see the inner Panim, the Pnimius, the Mamish, the Pnimius of Hashem, that Hashem says he can't see.
What if you see the shape of the head and the whole body, or like a robe of, like a whole body, but not the features in the face?
No, because that's another good point. But that's really the difference between what God says to Moshe, that you could see the back and not the face. The difference between the back and the face is the features. I mean, like it says, like if you were to talk to a person and the person's back is towards you, you can't.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the front, seeing the front without the features.
I mean, like seeing just the
like
form
a blank face. Face, a head, a body, but not the specific like eyes, ears, nose.
Possibly. Possibly, if you wanted to give it that kind of example, possibly. I think it's more. I think it's more like when you look into a person's eyes and you see deep what's the soul through the eyes. It's the face also is a concealment. There's kalim. There's many levels of kalim of vessels. So even the face is a vessel, is a keli to the pneum, to the real core of the person. So he says, Masha Ein Kain. Sorry, like it says, Parim Parim Divrei Hashem B'Macham. God spoke face to face. B'li shum emtzois v'slapshus klal, without any concealment. V'lachen ksiv, therefore it says, V'chol ha'am roim es ha'koilis. Their definition, they saw the sounds. Roim es ha'nishma, they saw what was heard. V'shoimim es ha'nir, and they heard what was seen. Means that there was such a revelation where the normal way of functioning wasn't there. It was you saw
synesthesia. Synesthesia.
Which means?
Well, like, let me just see if I can find a definition, because I'm not a dictionary, but yeah, okay, hold on. So it's defined as, whoops, why isn't it going to? Okay, I misspelled it. Hold on. Okay, mixing of the senses, a perceptual phenomenon where stimulation of one sensory pathway triggers involuntary experience. Well, we don't need that part, but it's a multi-sensory all at the same time, and not distinguish, let's say, I'm going by my own experience now, not distinguish one sense from another, but multi-sensory and yeah.
No, so something to, but the idea is that there is such a pneum that there's a break of the system. Rak hayiroim. So what's the idea? He says there was no separation in the revelation, because again, or is simplicity. Kalim, the vessels are defined, definitive. Hey, Danny. So we have the or and the kalim. When there's more or and less kalim, then the or is kind of functioning on its own, and it's not limited to the traditional method of the kalim. So the kalim of, for instance, your ears hear and your eyes see. So in such a revelation where the ears are seeing and the eyes are hearing, or what you hear, you see, and what you see, you hear, means that the or is such a great light. And therefore there's no separation of the madregas, of the levels. They're able to see godliness, more the light, the essence. And there was no separation, he says, God forbid, between what you can see and what you could hear. So that's the way it was at its ultimate level of revelation by Mount Sinai.
Yeah,
So
like this faceless face that I saw in the figure, where the particular features are not there, but the whole thing was light.
Oh, so that's the idea of or. But that's the way it is by Matan Torah. Mashenkim begolas, in the exile. There was many separations, and in the separations is bislapshus, not only in the panim of he saw the image of man, but he also had to see the godliness being carried by the levels of pnei ari pnei shor, of the ox and the lion. V'kumar Dachmashi gives an example. He says tinuk. The Alter Rebbe says tinuk sheyoichel lahavin b'yoiser, a kid who has a child who has a greater level of understanding. You could teach him one page of something, or more, in one setting, in one sitting, in one lesson. As much as he could, the student, he or she could understand. But a child who's not in the level yet, he or she, to understand so much in one setting, in one class. Yeah, you can't learn that an entire subject in one sitting. You have to break it up to various classes. There's kachadach moshe, so too. And this is the way it was traditionally throughout the time of the temple. They were able to see things in a single lesson, take it all in. And our comprehension of godliness. In the revelations of godliness. Didn't have to come through middle. And friends, and all the examples given in the student and the teacher, whether it is when the student has to have many examples, in order to understand, to apply the information. The example is the method. So too, you have the examples is the idea of the Pnei Ashar, of the image of the ox and the image of the lion. We understand the character of the lion, the character of the ox, the character of the Nesher, of the eagle, that is Rachmanas, and helps us understand the concept of Rachmanas. What's Moshe Rabbeinu do? Moshe Rabbeinu describes the compassion of the method of the compassion of the eagle, how it flies and it hovers and it protects. Ava Begolas, he says, but when it comes to the time of exile, when the Jewish people because we're in Golas now, are exiled and enclosed in the 70 Sarim, the 70 masters, which represent the 70 nations. So it's not, so the levels of godliness goes through, the revelation has a descent. It has to be broken up, like a student's lesson has to be broken up. It has to be enclosed in the image of the lion, the image of the ox. The lion represents the camp of Angel Michael.
So that's been being compared to different nations?
No, but the being amongst the different nations.
Like having different nations, like having different animals, it's on a lower level. The nationhood itself is like a lower level.
Yeah, but it's not just that the nations, as he's using the nations as an example, but the very fact that the Jewish people are no longer on our land and we're amongst the nations, and each person is a citizen of their nation, and they become part of the nation, so to say. So they're dispersed amongst the nations, it affects the Jewish people's standing in revelation as well, like what you're saying, because the nations are on a lower level, so that affects the Jewish people. And again, it goes hand in hand. The reason why we're amongst the nation is because
Israel's a nation too. Israel's a nation among the nations.
But it is the chosen nation among the 70 nations, yes. Ava Begolus, when we're in the exile, Shagolim stops by and Sarum, we are clothed in the 70 nations. So the levels of relation goes through descent. Many levels. He has to go into the Pnei Aryeh, into the image of the lion, the image of the ox. Pnei Aryeh Machne Michal. The lion represents the camp of Michal, which is the idea of kindness. Shem Kineged Machne Reuven Teimana. And if you compare it to the way the Jewish people traveled in the desert, so that's the camp of Reuven. If you go towards Reuven, that's with Chesed. Not just that, just like Reuven that was his general camp, but it was broken up to 3 tribes, and in the 3 tribes there were many families and individuals. So too, the whole camp of Michael is not just the camp of Michael as like a single image of many angels, millions of angels, or countless amount of angels that are all replicas of Michael. There's many different divisions. Within Michael itself, there's many levels. And each one has its connection, its method of bringing flow of godliness in its own character. For instance, the love we get through the malachim, that's why he's explained. That's why the davening changed. The davening in the time of the temple they didn't have the brachas before Krishma. You had to say Shema Yisrael. You have to say Shema Yisrael, and then when you say Shema Yisrael, say V'yahavta. I love God. What does it mean to love God? So once upon a time, love God was clear. Everything was clear. It didn't have to conceal. It didn't have to be channeled through different enclothements. So if it doesn't have to be channeled through different enclothements, it was clear. So you said Shema Yisrael, you loved Hashem. Hello, Reb Shimon. Welcome. But when you have today the davening, is you say the Hashem. You have to describe the angels. Why? Because through the angels that gives the Ava. The way for a person, each individual, that they understand their love for Hashem has to go through the different methods of the angels. And each angel within the camp of Michal had its own character. People respond differently, different levels of love, different triggers that trigger a person, because love is an emotion. So the simple translation of chapter 91 of Tehillim is that God commands the angel to protect you. But if you look at it in the way of avoda, it's not just a protection that you're being protected from the elements. In your journey, the angel is there to help you in your journey of Avas Hashem, of Yiras Hashem, and love and fear of God. They have to carry you through this journey. That these angels are the methods of flow for you to respond, because you're b'torach hagayla. There's darkness, and therefore you don't see things clearly. They carry you through. And this elevates the soul, the soul in the golus, ani b'toich hagoyla. And again, like he says, I'm inside I'm in the Yechezkel says that I'm standing in the goyla in the diaspora. It's not just talking that he's standing in the diaspora, the Shekhinah's in the diaspora. So there's the revelation it's not just on the receptacle side. It means we can have the example of the student and the teacher, like they explain in the examples of Chassidus. It's not just that the teacher says something to two students, and one student is very smart and he or she understands it in one way, and the other student is more simple and understands it in another way. There's different levels of education. Where one subject can be taught on a higher level, the teacher has to teach it on a lower level. So there's a concealment from the teacher as well, not just from the student. And this is the method of the neshama through its connection through the individual angel or angels to get its inspiration, its avodah. For instance, Pnei Arya, when the level of the lion is Madreg Sa'ava. And like he said, there's many levels within the camp of the Arya, of the lion, of Michael. By Dei Pnei Ashar, and the ox, which represents Gvura, is Yira, gives a person the fear and awe of Hashem. And therefore, he says, like I said, therefore Chazal, and because Ani B'toich HaGoyla, because of the levels of concealment, the davening has changed. Because we can't just say Shema Yisrael v'Yafta. By pronouncing the 6 letters of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and contemplating on that, it's not going to bring v'Yafta to love. And therefore, Tiknu Chazal, Brichas Shnei Krishma. The rabbis instituted the blessings before Krishma. If you read the translation and you have Kavanas at Tefillah, it's talking about we talk about the angels, not to describe a fact, but to connect to that fact. Because through describing the angels, it awakens us and opens us to having the V'Yahafta. We talk about the noise and all the energy of the angels. And from all this description, the point is, midas hayira. This helps us with our yira, and the same thing with Abba. There, and he says, Masha'enke midaraisa. I'm going to say, usually we skip the parentheses. In this case, it's kind of important. Masha'enke midaraisa. When you talk about biblically, what's the biblical obligation in the tefillah, in the prayer? Sagi b'krishma vad. One doesn't have to say the prayers, the blessings before Shema. Hainu k'moisha ha'ib mei Moshe. That's where it was in times of Moshe. It didn't have to go through the channels of the chariot of the Aryeh, of the lion and the ox. Again, the conversation that Moshe has in Parshas Kisisa after the sin of the golden calf, and God says the Jewish people are no longer. Barbara. The Jewish people are no longer on the level that they once were. God says He's sending an angel. Therefore, there's a concealment from Hashem. And Moshe says, He didn't want the angels. Yes, Barbara.
So we don't have to say the blessings before this. We say the Shema. But when I was reading,
today we do have to say. But he's saying that biblically, it was an addition from the rabbis to say the blessings.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
No. We have the obligation to say the blessings before Karashma. He's saying, midaraisa, biblically, one doesn't have to. Like in the times of Moshe. Why? Because Moshe didn't want to have the shlichus with malach. He didn't want that the Jewish people should have to get their flow through the angels. Like it says in Ein Panecha, we want to go Panecha. We want it from Hashem direct. Don't send me through, don't channel things through the angels. Just like Moshe didn't want that Hashem, the Hashem shouldn't conceal himself, so to the avodah shouldn't have to come through concealment. That's all the way it was in the times of Moshe. Afterwards, because no longer are we able to just get direct connection, because it's too great of a light for us. We've lowered ourselves. The descent is in what happened in the godless and the sins. And even the times Yeshua changed. It's the Malach says to Yeshua, like we learned in the Gemara Sanhedrin, talks about Atabasi. The angel tells Moshe, Yeshua, only now I came. But in the times of your teacher, Moshe, I didn't have to come. There was no separation. So too today. If we want to come to understand and to feel the oneness of God, we have to be Kriya Shema. And the love of Hashem, you have to have the brachas. So to answer your question, Barbara, of course you have to say the blessings today. Shesham nemra me'inyan hamalachim, and the blessings are talking about the angels. And by describing the love and the fear of the angels, that helps us to get our love and our fear. When we say the Shema, we should react. And this is all, again, there's a few fundamental happenings in Torah. And one of them that carries through the generations is the image of the dream of Aaron, of Yaakov, when he leaves his father, which is really the journey of a Jew, a journey of a person in this world. Is Yaakov leaving his father, like the neshama leaves heaven and goes to Beersheba, like we learn in the Maamar of Torah. And at that point, Yaakov has the dream of the sulam, of the ladder.
Excuse me, I don't know if the others have this, but you cut out after you said something of Yaakov, and then you said of the ladder. There was a break in between. It was empty.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It was the second time it was a break like that.
Sometimes I don't running on the office's Wi-Fi. Sometimes it doesn't run well. So what he said was like this. The Yaakov Avinu, his journey is the journey of a Jew, of a neshama down this world. So when he begins his journey and he goes down from Beersheba, he goes to Haran, which is like the soul going from heaven down to earth. He has the dream of the sulam, of the ladder, Shira Yaakov. He sees that the sulam is positioned on the earth, going upwards, and that's called that Knesset Yisrael. And this ladder is the multiple of the Jewish people, close to Shamis Yisrael, general situation of the souls of the Jewish people. Shemutavarta, because we are like that ladder that is positioned on this earth. What does it mean on this earth? Begufa Gashmi. So like the ladder, the bottom of the ladder supports itself on the floor, on the ground. So too, we are in this in a physical body. That's the eretz of our existence. Nevertheless, our head, our avoda, our strive is magia shemaim, is to go to heaven. Yisrael old machshava. Although we come down to this world, but before the whole creation, the thought of the Jewish people entered the existence of the Jewish people, entered the thought process of Hashem before creation. That although, yes, that we need to get today inspired because we are neshama beguf, so we get inspired by describing the angels, but that's only because of the way we are grounded in eretz. But the Raishai, the top of the ladder is Shemaima, is in heaven. And because the source of the souls of the Jewish people are higher than even the angels. Even though the way we are down in this world, we receive inspiration, flow from the angels. Because the existence of the angels start from God's utterance. They were created in one of the days of creation. And they were part of chitzainis, of external. They don't reach the machshava. So though the machshava is much deeper at its core, but the way we manifest, it comes down to the world. We have to receive from the angels. But that's only the way it is in this world. But at our core, at the sharash, at the root, the neshamas are higher than the angels. In the times Yeshaya, which was then, he said the prophecy, also comparing, he also had the chariot, but the chariot on a much elevated level. And therefore, for the simple reader, the simple student who reads the chariot of Yeshaya and the chariot of Yechezkel confuses people. The Maisa Markava, that confuses people because the descriptions of the animals and the lions and the roaring and the angels and the sounds. But in Yeshaya, it's more simplistic because it's the simplistic of the light. But we find the Yeshaya, what does he hear? He hears Kadosh, Kadosh, Shavayat Tzivakis, that the angels are saying Kadosh, Kadosh, Hashem, the Lord of hosts. God's coverage spreads over the whole creation of the world. Pirush, what does it mean that he heard Kadosh Kadosh from the angels? That they recognize that Hashem's holiness, Kedushasa, his separation, so to say, comes from Kodesh Elyon, that from what's separate from creation comes down to this world. How does it happen through the Jewish people? That's why the angels can't say Kaddish until the Jewish people say Kaddish. Because the angels are a reality of creation. They understand that there's beyond the reality, but they are a reality of creation. The only method of bringing beyond creation in creation is the avodah of the Jewish person, and therefore they can't say Kaddish until the Jewish people say Kaddish. Lies Pirish Lies Kudashasi Isbarach Nimshach, Mikoidish El Namata, Lies Mleichal Arts Gavoide. Why they begin to read this Stachus, Gimme Pam Kaddish, Lies Avaitzmakas, Mleichal Arts Gavoide. That they recognize that through that beyond Hashem, which is separate from creation, through the Stachus, through the chain of creation, comes down to this world to be the Lord of hosts of this creation. So the Jew, it goes in circular. That the starting of it starts from the Jewish people saying Kaddish. But where do the Jewish people have the power to say Kaddish? Because the angels are also part of the flow of creation. But at the source, although we receive Kedusha from the angels, but at the source, at the source of our soul, it says Kodesh Yisrael Hashem, it says Kodesh without a vav. That it's not about a flow. The difference between Kodesh with a vav and Kodesh without a vav, sometimes it's spelled Kuf Dal Chin. Like it says Kodesh Yisrael Havaya. And then it says sometimes Kadosh with the vav. The difference is the vav is the letter of flow. It means from top to bottom. It's like a pole, right? So you have Kodesh Yisrael Hashem means something that's separate. It's not separate for a purpose. So the Jewish people are separate beyond the purpose. Kodesh with a vav is a flow. The purpose is to bring the holiness down. So though in avoida, that purpose, that's the idea of Kodesh with a vav. But in essence of existence, it's Kodesh Yisrael Hashem. The Jewish people are separate. Kodesh without a vav. It's essential separation. It's not about bringing down flow. That the Jewish people, yes, we're grounded in this world, and we have to get a flow from the angels. But you know where your source is, where your Rosh is. Your Rosh comes from a place that's Kodesh Yisrael Hashem, that's Kodesh beyond all machshava. It means, yeah, what we're talking about over here is not just a description of what you are, but in order to understand you're a person's avodah and purpose in this world, you have to understand that there's an existence of the Jewish people that's Kodesh Yisrael Hashem, is separate to God, nothing to do with creation. It's Kodesh without a vav. It's not because of something. It's very essential for a person to understand when you go into the avodah. By days, because that's where the ladder goes. It starts from the ground, it goes all the way up to beyond, so to say, the flow into creation. It helps for the angels to go up and down. That's what Yaakov sees. Yaakov sees in his vision everything. In the vision of the ladder, he sees everything. Like the Rebbe always used to say, that's the same ladder that the Baal Shem Tov put up, and the same ladder the Alter Rebbe put up. I mean, to say this is one ladder. This is the whole creation comes in this dream this vision that Yaakov has. So what does he see? He sees the Malchei Elikim, Oilim V'Yordim. The angels are going up and down the ladder. Oilim Pirush, Shemis Alam Yisrael. The angels, what does it mean that the angels are going up? He saw angels going up and coming down. So going up means that because the Jewish people reach a level that's beyond creation, Kodesh Yisrael Hashem, Reish Oluv Machshava, that elevates the angels. Like I said, the angels can't say Kaddish until the Jewish people say Kaddish. I can eat the honey with the comb. It says that's the angels are the substance. Let's see where we're holding. It's jumped over here. So he says when I think something's missing in the text here. Through the self-sacrifice the Jew has, when the person says Kriya Shema and says Hashem Echad v'Hafta, and I love Hashem b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha, I love Hashem with my heart, meaning all my heart, with my nefesh alikis and my nefesh bahamas, my godly and my animal soul, and my b'chol nafshecha. I'm ready to give my life for Hashem. The Hainu b'china say Lecha Hashem nafshi esai, turn towards Hashem. And the Jewish person goes back to its source, which means Kodesh Yisrael Hashem, higher than creation. Olub Machshava goes where the Jewish people entered the thought before creation. Like it says, what does it mean that God is going to take my soul back? We're back to where? To its source. Before you blew it into me. By B'sharshan at its source. Much greater than the angels. So when we get inspired, yes, there's also the angels going down. And that gives us the ability to feel Mesiras Nefesh, to be connected. So the angels it's like a coach and a player, right? You have a coach has all the talent of teaching, but the game is won by the players. There's no victory for the coach if there's no players on the field. And the players are the Jewish people. They're on the field of life. So yes, they're being coached and they get the inspiration from the angels, but the only way for the angel to get its elevation, oila, is when we live our full life. Yes, that the method of having the Shema properly is because we get inspired by the angels. But once we get that inspiration, it lights up the entire ladder, and doesn't just light up the ladder on its floor on Eretz, but it goes all the way back to its source, to the Rosh, and that gives elevation to the angels that they could go that high as well. Because when the Jewish people daven the way they should daven, and they feel the Mesiras Nefesh, they feel the love, that's much greater than the angels could ever reach on their own. And that gives elevation to the angels. That the angels now can elevate because we go back to our source. Because they are part of the story of enabling us, the way we are, our souls and bodies, and with that limitation to be inspired and to say Shema properly. But once we do that, it connects our reality in this world with our source. And then it lets for the angels, because they're part of the story, to have that elevation. They could be connected to the essence of the king. It says 2 times oilim. It doesn't say oila v'yored. Oila v'yored be singular. It says oilim v'yordim, that the angels elevate in plural and they descend in plural. What is the 2 elevations? Oilim trei, right? A minimum of plural is 2. There's 2 levels. There's the lion and there's the ox. There's love and fear. You can't have one. V'yordim hu b'chinas nesher. And what is going down? Because that's the idea of the nesher. That's the idea of the compassion. This is getting to the idea of the nesher. Ki nesher u'milasher noisher, dahainu davar shnoi filamata. Nesher comes from the idea of falling downwards. U'b'chinas harachmanis. And what is the compassion that comes down? Al nitzis halikis, on the spark of the soul that is grounded in this body and being entrapped with the wants and desires and limitations of the body. The compassion is not on the body. The compassion is on that when you return to Hashem and He has compassion on you, on the soul that's in the body. That the soul that has to go through this whole experience has to fall from a high place, to come to this physical body with its limitations and wants. And therefore it means it's not like it's an entrapment where the soul is I mean, of course the soul is constantly with Hashem, but it's partially limitations. The need to sleep, the need to eat, the need to relationships, all the things that the body has needs to now as part of the person's soul is itself. Not just talking about a virus. We're talking about just being involved in chumrius, in limited things. The soul is part of, like we said in the beginning of the Maamar, the soul is limitless and the body is very limited. And if we ask Hashem, we ask Hashem because the compassion is there. And not always are we perfect in this relationship. We say, have forgive us because we've transgressed. He's going to say that. What's the idea of Pashiyah? It says like this, like in the beginning, man was created. He was placed in the Garden of Eden to serve and to watch. What does it mean to watch? We have a job to watch the Garden of Eden, which is the revelations. The Garden of Eden represents in the person's individual avoda. The Garden of Eden represents the revelations of godliness within the person. That the righteous, they sit with their crowns on their heads, and they take in the manifestations of Hashem's revelation in the Garden of Eden, because the reward for the mitzvah is the experience of the mitzvah itself. It means when a person is in the Garden of Eden, he or she realizes the godliness that you've accomplished with the mitzvah. That's itself the reward. Like we said, the mitzvahs are garments. And when a person performs a mitzvah, you're bringing godliness to yourself. You don't always feel it, but when you pass away and you go to the Garden of Eden, you do feel it. What is fundamentally every mitzvah? The fundamental, there's the individual mitzvahs of how you do the mitzvahs, but there's the general kavanah of mitzvahs, which is that I'm doing what Hashem wants. I'm accepting upon myself the yoke of the king. If a person is to choose mitzvahs and say this mitzvah works for me and that mitzvah does not work for me. It's not to say that it's a fundamental break in Kabbalah soul. Kabbalah soul, if you accept the yoke of the king, you're accepting whatever the king wants. It's not the details aren't necessary. When you say, 1 second, I'm not accepting everything you say. I'll do X, Y, and Z and other things I'm not ready to do. So by fundamentally, you have no Kabbalah soul. You're ready to do certain things, but you don't have Kabbalah soul. The idea of the mitzvahs is the Kabbalah soul. And when you're in the Garden of Eden, you have that general Kabbalah soul. So that's a general connection and light and revelation to the soul. And you understand that and you appreciate that when you're sitting in the Garden of Eden. But when a person becomes mechanical, we're not even talking about a person who transgresses. We're talking about a person who his or her connection to Hashem is mechanical, which is what it means. Mitzvahs anashim lumada, people who are just accustomed to doing things. I wake up in the morning, I go to shul because that's what I always do. If you do everything you're supposed to, on paper, on the checks and balances, everything, you don't do anything bad and you do everything good. But you do it mechanically because that's what you're used to doing. And that's, you're a person of order. Of course, you can have reward. Why? Because technically you did what you're supposed to do, but you weren't alive with it. You were mechanical with it. So the revelation is not going to be the same. This that we're saying that the tzaddikim, the righteous, take in the light, so to say, of the mitzvahs. Means it's not just that you've done technically what you're supposed to be doing. You're alive with what you're doing. It's a Kabbalah soul. You're excited in every mitzvah that you have an opportunity to do. The tzaddik understands that the idea is not just to do something, but when you do that thing, that mitzvah, you're bringing godliness on yourself. Every time I do a mitzvah, I'm doing a commandment of the king. When I fulfill the mitzvahs, you're accepting God's kingship over you. Yes, there's individual mitzvahs you have to do throughout the day, throughout the year. But whatever it is that Hashem wants you to do, you're doing it because every way, these are different methods of bringing godliness on your soul. And the true righteous person who's conscious in everything that they're doing becomes a true chariot to the godliness through their actions. Like if you think for a second, what do we say when we make a bracha? That you've sanctified us with your commandments. Then you have, that's the way, if we're connected. What's the opposite of that? Because like it says, the prophet says, Yeshaya, that my thoughts are not your thoughts, my ways are not your ways. Pirish. So what does it mean? When you're not in doing my things, your way doesn't again have to be an avera. But even if your focus or your want is not that it's my way, the archechem is not the rachoi. Your way is not my way. Then then your thoughts are not my thoughts. If your ways would be my ways, then that makes it aligns your thoughts with my thoughts. But when your ways are not my ways, so then your thoughts are not my thoughts because you split by the ways. Again, it doesn't even have to be an avera. But what you're doing is not connected to what Hashem wants you to do. You're mechanical, and even more than if you're transgressing. When you call each Yisrael, but everyone has the spark, and that spark awakens in the person, and inspires the love, and the person wants to connect. We have ups and downs. We have this spark of inspiration that where the soul breaks through. Even if even if the thoughts are not aligned, but the spark breaks through and gives a person a feeling of love, then we have the falls. And the fall is not just at the spark. The fall brings the spark down as well. And he says here something even deeper. If there would never be the inspiration when a person had the up that comes down is almost more damaging than if there was never the inspiration. And when the soul is trying to break through and gives a person a feeling of being alive, of being in love with Hashem, of connecting. And because you're not in the place where you should be, so after that there's a fall. What happens is that energy, that surge that came within you before the fall, that needs a vessel, and that itself falls down. And then what happens is, as opposed to just never happening, now it becomes a source of negativity. That's why we find sometimes people that in their highest moments of spirituality, they could have all of a sudden, very soon afterwards, a very low moment of reality, of behavior. And it's not a contradiction. It's not. It is a contradiction actually, but it's not a contradiction in fact, because the reason why they actually had this whole negative act afterwards is because it was siphoning off the positive energy. Had there never been a surge in the holy energy, then the negative energy wouldn't have a life force. So now what you're doing is v'zeki fashanu. That's the pshia. What do you say to God? Mecholanu, forgive us, ki pashanu. What's the pshia? Pshia means negligence. Where's the negligence? Pshia is in the laws of Torah, right? A person who's a watcher. Shmir, right? They're saying, Avdul Sham, you have to be a watcher. You have to watch your inspirations. You have to watch your upliftingness. When the soul breaks through, you're now the watcher of that experience. When you're negligent with it and it falls, and now not only does it fall, it becomes a source of life to negativity. Who's responsible? You are, because you're negligent. And that's what we say to Hashem, God forgive us, keep Hashem, because we were negligent. Pshia niske b'Torah. Where do we find the laws of pshia, of negligence in Torah? In the 4 watchers, right? The watcher who watches for free, the shomer chinam, even a shomer chinam is responsible. If you're a free watcher, right? Someone says, please watch this for me, right? And you're negligent, so you can't say, well, you're not paying me. Yes, you don't have responsibilities for what's called gneva v'aveda. If it gets lost or stolen, that's beyond my responsibility because I wasn't getting paid for it. If you're getting paid, then you have a higher level of responsibility. But everyone has a responsibility for negligence, even if you did a free job for someone. When it comes to the laws of the watcher, even the free watcher, that means the person who watches for free, he's doing a favor, or she's doing a favor. Still, but you can't be negligent if you take a job. When you have that spark, you have to watch it. That don't lose the spark and something else finds it. What is it? How do you watch the spark? This is brought down in Sfarim, Shemar, Mishnah, Torah. When you have an inspiration, that's why the Rebbe, Alter Rebbe, in many places always says, and what's the idea of learning after davening? Because when we don't all have the ability to properly handle, if we have these moments of elevation and davening after we daven, we go out to the world, and if we're not shomer, we don't watch the elevations of davening. So when we go out to the world, that energy, like I said, has to go somewhere, and a lot of times it goes either to negativity, anger. That's why we find a lot of people angry and shul, and then or it goes into other things. It feeds other negativity. It has to go somewhere. It becomes a life force for something. So what do you have to do? Shmira. How do you watch a Mishnah, learning? That's why this idea of having a shir after davening. When God saw the light, the inspiration, lignois, he said you have to hide it somewhere. It has to be protected somewhere. What does it mean practically? When a person feels a level of inspiration, and we have it all the time, whether it's at a farbrengen, whether it's at a moment, whether it's davening and shul, we have this great surge of love, of connection. Tzarech lishmar, you have to make sure, you have a responsibility now. You're a watcher of that experience. And tzarech lishmar, you have to protect. That doesn't, that it could become counterproductive. It could make you fall even further. Vashmira, and how do you watch it? You have to study Torah. That is the vessel. That's the place where God hid the light. As explained in other places, if you don't watch it, then you become negligent in the spark, and something else is going to find it. And he says, this means that I've have children. God is talking. In Yeshaya Navi says, Bonim Gidalti, I raised children, and I elevated them, and they were negligent. What does it mean, Banim? Pirushani gedalti remamti. I let the spark become alive in a person. Makar chaytzim shalishmasam. They have a source. The Jewish person's source is so deep. Shisrael old machshava. We came from the thought process of Hashem. Vein pasher be mamish, and you were mamish negligent with this whole. Your existence comes from so high, and nevertheless you're negligent with it when your source is revealed to you. The haino nitzla kisha behem, that the spark that you have, instead of watching it, you're negligent with it. And so how do we fix that? Because we do it all the time, unfortunately. Is mechalan, we ask Hashem to forgive us. Mechilu inin gili ratzon. For instance, what does it mean we ask Hashem to forgive us? It means we want Hashem to have his ratzon, to reveal his want towards the Jewish people. For instance, if a person's angry at someone, at their friend, I don't want to hear from you anymore. And when you make up with that person and you ask forgiveness, and then the person is back to having a desire towards you. And how do we awaken this? How do we awaken this mechila that God should have a want towards us? So he says, Gili Ritzin Zeh is not so much through avoida. He's going to explain the avoida later. But the idea is that's the Rahmanis, that's the Kinesher. That now we understand the pasuk. Now this is the flow of the psukim, because we're not going to be able to finish the Maamar. The pasuk starts. It's all the reading of Haazinu in Sheni, right? It says Kichelek Hashem Amoy. So that's the statement. Where do you come from? You're Chelek Hashem. And then it says Yimtze'eu Beretz Midbar, but you were found in the desert. That's the pshia. That's the negligence. What are you doing in the desert? The desert's a place of destitute. There's nothing going on in the desert. There's no life in the desert. But you're Chelek Hashem. What's the answer? Kinesher Yerkina. So you need the Rachmanis, which is to reveal the Ratzin again, like the eagle has the Ratzin. That's the Rachmanis coming down the ladder. And how do we do that? Through the 13 attributes of Micha, which we say, that God is able to handle our oven, our avoinus. And he overlooks the pesha, the pshia, the negligence. God says, you were negligent. But the compassion is that, what's compassion? Definition of compassion, unlike kindness is, kindness doesn't judge. Kindness is more about the person who's giving kindness. I need to give. Avram Avinu needed to find someone to give hamshachas, to give to. Bala chesed is to give chesed because I need to give chesed. Like it says, more that the calf wants to drink, the mother wants the milk. But more that the poor person, that the rich person does for the poor person does for the rich person, because the rich person needs to give. The character of the Baal Chesed is to be Chesed. Rachmanis is not Chesed. Compassion is that you're Pesheya, you were negligent, but nevertheless I have Rachmanis. Rachamim recognizes there's a problem, but never overrides the problem because of the compassion. So compassion is much deeper than Chesed. That's why Chesed is to the right, and compassion is Tiferes, is Yaakov, is the torso that goes all the way to the keser, to the top of the head. So how do we awaken the 13 attributes of mercy? So we have to do something otherwise we were Pesheya, we were negligent. That's the idea of return, the 10 days of tshuva. And that's why we say, what do we say in 10 days of tshuva, chapter 130? From our inner depth, and the idea is, it's very important. When we say, it's not that we're coming to say, I have X, Y, and Z. I did this, and I'm calling out to you from mimamakim, from my depth. Mimamakim Krasich Hashem is that everything else falls down. You have nothing else to say. When the Rebbe says that the ikar idea of tshuva, of Kiyah Shofar is the tza'aka, Abba Hatzileni, the cry, Father, Father, help me. He says the emphasis is not even the Abba, just the cry. Abba is already a word. You're already making an argument. You're my father. You're giving an angle. Why should you Hatzileni? Why should you save me? Because you're my father. But it says Abba. It says that the father and the mother Azavuni left me. Vashem Yasveni. Right? We say in chapter 27. The idea is not to make the argument. It's the tza'aka, the cry itself. Because that's the mimamakim karsich Hashem. Because on paper, an argument, you have no argument. You're peshay, you're negligent. So the idea is you have no argument. But there's the tza'aka, mimamakim karsich Hashem, from my inner depth, from my core, stripped of anything, I call out to Hashem. When a person reaches this depth, so then when you're not coming with any argument, you're not coming with any stories, you're coming just Abba, beyond Abba, the tza'aka, the cry, mimamakim, so that reaches the oimek elin, the depth of Hashem, without it, that's the rachmanis of over al pesha, that overlooks the negligence. Oimka dekula, the depth of everything. It's much greater than any chain of creation, and therefore it's greater than any negligence. By calling out from your inner depth, you awaken the inner core of God's want towards us. That's beyond the whole chain of creation. At that point, there is no negligence. The negligence doesn't matter to God. And even if you were right, we say, Matitinle, what did you give him? By day bechinas tshuva, now when a person reaches this level of tshuva, so hu chayzer, he or she returns, that itself strips the evil forces, the forces of negativity. Get away from my nitzis and neshama. Hands off the core of my soul. You have no place to be here. I'm now, yesterday you were siphoning off all the energy off me. Get away. It's my core connected to the core of the Eibishter. That he says that it takes away the spark that you were negligent on. It's not just that there's a negligence and it continues to be negligence. It gets rid of the negligence. And therefore it uproots what was negligent, and therefore there's no more siphoning off the core of the soul. The sitra achra, the negative forces, that were siphoning energy off the soul. Because now the soul is going back to its source. Because what you have done is you took away, I no longer want to be doing these things. You take away any want from the depth of your heart. The idea that Job says you spit it out. It's chayil ve'ki'enu, means like you're throwing it up. There's no longer, you're getting, the spark no longer could be trapped in the body of negativity. When we reveal the 13 attributes of mercy, that we say, Mikel kamoicha, the 13 attributes of Moshe, God pulls out the spark from that's trapped within the inner core of the person. In this relationship, the response of God's want, no matter what, to the Jewish people, is revealed in the 10 days of Tshuva. Because we're calling out to Hashem from the inner core of our soul. Therefore it says, when should a person seek out God when he's found? When is God found? When is he looking for that response from us, for that initiation from us? Is the 10 days of Tshuva. Meaning this spark that's been lost and now been giving life because of our negligence. Now it goes back to you could start again. And now you could watch it again, protect it again, because it goes back to its source. That's where it says that God found us in the desert. What's the idea of found? Found something that was lost. What was lost? The sparks, the energy, the godliness that God gave us. The inspiration he gave us that we were pesheya, that we were negligent. You call out to him when you're close, when you're no longer lost in the desert. You're very close to this idea because you could take out the soul from being entrapped, so to say. Like it says, this is very much alluded to the idea that Yonah was swallowed by the fish. And when he did tshuva, the fish spit him out. He was trapped in the fish, the big body of the fish, the big body of the world. And when he recognizes that, it's all part of the avoda. The fish spits him out. And he continues beautifully in the Maamar the idea of Kinesha Yarikinoi, continuing the idea of explaining more in depth the idea of the Rachmanis of the compassion, of this compassion through the compassion of the eagle, and how there's the third level, the fourth level that we say in the pasuk at the end of the Aliyah. It says Hashem b'dadya and chenu. There's even a level higher than the Rachmanis, the loneliness, and then there's actually a Maamar that I'm going to be teaching later today, very early in America, but throughout the day here, where the Rebbe elaborates on this idea of the Nesher and the Se'eu B'Midbar found in the desert, that sometimes that actually there's a positive being found in the desert, because in the desert, that's the avodah, that's the idea is that we have to sometimes be in the desert to be found, and actually it's a mitzvah, just like when a person finds a lost object. So he or she is very excited because before you found it, it was lost. So too, God has an excitement, like someone who finds a lost object when he finds us specifically in the desert. But that's another Maamar for another time. Laila Tov, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. And for those we don't see in the next few classes before Yom Kippur, I want to wish everyone of easy fasting, all the brachas b'tova nir vanigla. Laila Tov, take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.